Call upon the honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley. Oh, the honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm honoured to rise here tonight, Mr. Speaker, to speak on this issue about moving liquor stores out of the small downtown areas of the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you heard yesterday here in the legislature when I asked a question to the Minister of the NSLC and also the Minister of the Economic Development, Mr. Speaker, and it was about how these downtown cores in the small towns in Nova Scotia are going to suffer, Mr. Speaker, when these liquor stores move out of the downtown core and they're put in these big box stores out in the outer areas. The downtown core was so important, Mr. Speaker, for many of the small towns and municipalities in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as of yesterday, and I asked my question to the Minister, today I find out also the liquor store in Liverpool is going to be moving out of the downtown, Mr. Speaker, out into the superstore. Mr. Speaker, what does it do to the downtown core in these businesses? An example of the, I think it was Mr. Speaker, Mr. John Devoux sent the letter off to the Minister, asking the Minister as Devoux? I guess he's a good member, Mr. Speaker. It's a Crown Corporation, Mr. Speaker. These are dollars, Crown dollars, Mr. Speaker. Taxpayers' money that are being used to move these liquor stores to superstores, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they had many discussions down there, and they don't want these things to happen. And the Minister yesterday mentioned about a tender. Well, Mr. Speaker, if you looked at Section A in that tender, which I tabled on yesterday, Mr. Speaker, there was a couple of words in there, Mr. Speaker, about should and may not, but may not. Mr. Speaker, should and may not. There's no guarantee that another liquor store is going to open up in Yarmouth, Mr. Speaker. If they go on sales, Mr. Speaker, where's the competition? You have one place to buy your alcohol beverages in the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, it's the NSLC. There's no competition, Mr. Speaker. You can't go to another business downtown, and you can't go. You'll have to go only to this place outside of town, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we saw that there's 10 stores that are currently going to be under construction in the spring of 2005. Most of these stores located in the super value superstores and the Sobeys stores, Mr. Speaker, with contracts being signed, the T's being crossed, and the I's dotted, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just wondering how the effect of the small town Nova Scotia is going to be with these core tenants that are pulling out of downtown, Mr. Speaker, and going to elsewhere, Mr. Speaker. It's important, Mr. Speaker, that we know that people invested in their downtown core. We see revitalization of downtown where they're doing up their storefronts and getting money from the federal government, the provincial government, doing up their storefronts and making the downtown look nice again, Mr. Speaker, and attracting businesses. When people get off the ferry in Yarmouth, they like to come downtown, Mr. Speaker. They don't like to jump and go over. They like to go there for the good food and the good people, Mr. Speaker, not to drive out to a superstore and a box store out in the outskirts of a town, Mr. Speaker. That's how you get to know the people of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, is walking through the downtown core and saying good morning and good afternoon and good evening to people, Mr. Speaker. That's how this province is built, on the hospitality of the downtown cores of many small towns in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, yourself coming from a small town in Spring Hill, beautiful facility, Mr. Speaker. But I mean, to be moving to take the Anne Murray Centre out of Spring Hill and put it out in Amherst somewhere, Mr. Speaker. I mean, those people come there. You know, those people come there, Mr. Speaker, to visit those downtown, Mr. Speaker. The main streets of small town Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid are going to be a way of the past, Mr. Speaker. When the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation decides to move all of these outlets out, and again, the small towns in Nova Scotia are going to suffer. There's 7 stores under development, Mr. Speaker, and this is, I tabled it yesterday, Mr. Speaker, from Rick Perkins, Vice President of Marketing Communications, Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. 7 more stores under development for this year, Mr. Speaker. How many small towns in Nova Scotia are going to suffer, Mr. Speaker, because of this? How many? When do we say to ourselves, we're trying to go to revitalization of downtown and bring these downtown... The example of the Yarmouth store, no, I think it was 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, that the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation spent almost $500,000 to redo that Nova Scotia liquor store in Yarmouth. Oh, yeah. Almost $500,000. 3 years later, they're going to move this store to a box store. superstore outside, Mr. Speaker. And then in the tender yesterday, it said, okay, shoulda, coulda, or, you know, but may not. But they put a tender out to look at downtown. Why would the liquor corporation spend $500,000 to renovate a store in downtown Yarmouth? $500,000 less than 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, or maybe a little longer, downtown, that kind of money, then to relocate it, then put a tender back out to move back into the downtown core. Is this not a waste of taxpayers' dollars, Mr. Speaker? You know, I'm just, you know, I don't know. It's either that, Mr. Speaker, or give money to a big industry and tax breaks as we see today, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to get involved in any of that kind of stuff, Mr. Speaker, but what I'm saying is the downtown cores are hurting. We saw many downtown revitalizations of Glace Bay and Cape Breton, revitalizations of the colleague from Cape Breton North, Minister Clark's, the downtown, beautiful revitalization of downtown. My colleague from Glace Bay, his downtown core is absolutely all redone, Mr. Speaker. The downtown core and my colleague from Cape Breton Centre, New Waterford, $4.4 million mini mall put in that place, Mr. Speaker. So what are we going to do? Are we going to just devastate all these little towns in Nova Scotia by moving? This is a mainstay business. This is a core tenant that's in that there and paying and employing people, Mr. Speaker. But these people come in Yarmouth or Liverpool or these small areas in Nova Scotia. When they go downtown to buy their beverages or whatever they're having, Mr. Speaker, they go in there and they shop while they're there. They may have a meal while they're there. They may have lunch at a restaurant. They may have dinner. They may have a bowl of soup, Mr. Speaker. They may drop into the local MLA's office and say hello. But Mr. Speaker, these you know, Mr. Speaker, these small downtown Nova Scotia, these are core tenants, again I say, Mr. Speaker. And these tenants, Mr. Speaker, by moving out are going to cause great harm, Mr. Speaker. I know there was many meetings with the mayor, the deputy mayor down in Yarmouth, the MLA for Yarmouth met with those people, Mr. Speaker. The discussions occurred, Mr. Speaker, throughout the summer. The discussions occurred throughout the summer, Mr. Speaker. Throughout the summer. They met again in the fall. You know, they informed the mayor of their business decision that this is what's going to happen and their plan. They informed the mayor in the fall, Mr. Speaker. The public tender was open for several weeks and numerous newspaper articles were written about the tender during this time. I'm just telling you, the MLA from Yarmouth is saying I don't know my facts, Mr. Speaker. The municipal, Mr. Speaker, no, I'm not down in Yarmouth. I'm in Cape Breton. That's the other end of the province for the MLA. Well, the minister doesn't know where it's at. He's absolutely right. He hasn't been there too many times. That's right. Mr. Speaker, this whole tender, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the tender, Schedule A, Mr. Speaker, to explore whether a small neighborhood store should be located in the south end of Yarmouth. Should be. There again we see the word should be, Mr. Speaker. Should be. So how are they going to base the? Was there ever an economic development plan for this, Mr. Speaker? Was there anything ever done to say how is this going to affect this little town economically, Mr. Speaker? Was there an impact study ever done, Mr. Speaker? I asked for that impact study yesterday, Mr. Speaker. I haven't seen it. I don't know if it exists. I don't know if it was ever done. But knowing that this is going to have an impact on such a small town, Liverpool, Yarmouth, all these small towns, and Mr. Speaker, whether it's Windsor, Sydney River, moving into the Sobeys in Sydney River, Mr. Speaker, they're moving into the Glace Bay Sobeys, Mr. Speaker. You know, Antigonish Sobeys, Port Hawkesbury Sobeys, Mr. Speaker. You know, they're attached to them. I guess my colleague from Glace Bay, MLA from Glace Bay, Mr. Speaker, they're attached. I guess it's like the smoke shops that they have attached to the Sobeys stores and attached. You have to go outside and come in a private door, I guess, whatever, because they're pharmacy. But I mean, Mr. Speaker, this is taxpayers' dollars. I don't think the province of Nova Scotia, this is a Crown corporation, and I don't think the province of Nova Scotia should devastate small town Nova Scotia by moving these main businesses. These are core businesses that have been there for a number of years. To spend all this money to redo these stores and renovate these stores, and then all of a sudden, less than 3 years later, to move out, Mr. Speaker. I think that's going to have a very, very devastating impacts on the small town Nova Scotia. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the honourable member from Yarmouth to participate in this debate tonight on the network of Nova Scotia liquor store across the province of Nova Scotia. I think I'd like to start, though, Mr. Speaker, with using facts instead of misconceptions in this discussion. The first fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission is a Crown corporation, not a commission as it formerly was, like a government department. It is a standalone Crown corporation. It has competent business people on their board who make business decisions to return the greatest revenues to the people of Nova Scotia. Those revenues, as we all know, have enabled this government with good management to balance the budget, to increase spending dramatically on health care, education, and especially roads, Mr. Speaker. Those are key infrastructures for small town, large town, rural, every Nova Scotian. When we look at communities such as Yarmouth, or we look at communities like Liverpool, or communities like Amherst, communities like Digby, for example, where the new retail-friendly model has been put in use, and where the new governance model, which returns greater returns to taxpayers here in Nova Scotia, let's look at them. The reason the RFP is done in the first place, it's a proper open tender. The tender allows various businesses in a community, whether it's the existing owner of the building that currently has the NSLC franchise, whether it's an NSL franchise owned by the NSLC, or other businesses in a community, they'll have the right to tender when it tenders up. Okay? The RFP goes out. In these communities where there is significant growth and activity, and most of those are rural Nova Scotia, because, Mr. Speaker, as everyone knows in this province, employment in rural Nova Scotia is up significantly in the last 5 years. We've seen a net of over 5,300 new jobs in the last 3 years in rural Nova Scotia. We see convergences in Cornwallis. We see .com in Yarmouth area. We see them looking at opportunities where they can expand. We see rural Nova Scotia, small town Nova Scotia, having more opportunities than they've had in decades. And this government prides itself on working very hard at that. But let's look at that retail model. The RFP goes out. People do their shopping, socializing near the large food retail centers, around shopping malls. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, they are interested, those companies, those groups that own them, and participating in having an NSLC franchise attached near them. Well, when that does happen, I'll give you a couple of figures just to point out how significant it is. In Amherst, where that new store was put in, and with the retail friendly, we're talking about retail space instead of warehouse. We're talking about customer friendly cold beer, wine racks, displays in a proper retail configuration for the modern consumer. Overall sales are up in the first year by 12%. When you look at Stellarton, for instance, it's up by 33.7%. When we look at Digby, an area which is a population base diplomatic of mid to small town rural Nova Scotia, the same configuration, up 14.2%. Over 80% customer satisfaction approvals on all these sites because it meets the modern consumer. The modern consumer goes to the grocery store, they do their shopping, and when they want to then be able to purchase alcohol, the store is right there. They don't have to make another trip. I think those things are key and where that money is spent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I may, how much time is left in my allotted time?
You have approximately 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The other thing I think that is absolutely key is looking at the opportunity, these net revenues with this new retail friendly model that the liquor stores adopted. When we look at the overall performance of the NSLC under this new governance model of a Crown corporation with its new retail model, since 2001, 4 years, Mr. Speaker, the overall net return to Nova Scotians, the taxpayers of Nova Scotians under that model, has increased by 22.3%. Mr. Speaker, that's $30.6 million that went into eliminating and reducing wait times, went into the education of our children, and it went into the maintenance of our highways. Those are critical dollars for a province the size of Nova Scotia that we're able to maximize the returns, satisfy the customers of the NSLC, and incorporate that into towns and villages all around Nova Scotia. The other important fact, I think, Mr. Speaker, that the taxpayers of Nova Scotia are concerned about, and certainly employment as the Minister of Economic Development, the employment at these new NSLC outlets has gone up because there's more customers. We need more employees to serve those customers properly. So instead of seeing an employment decline with employees with the NSLC, we've seen the actual numbers goes up. The consumer is happier. The consumer is happier, Mr. Speaker. A larger return to the taxpayers of Nova Scotia to pay for essential services and more employment for NSLC employees. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'd like to turn my time over to my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for sharing his time with me. Mr. Speaker, I've always been in the belief that 2 is better than 1. I believe that having a liquor outlet on the Stars Road and telling those people what the NDP caucus is telling me this evening, that the people on the Stars Road area are second class. They shouldn't have a liquor outlet on their street. Well, I believe that they deserve a liquor outlet, and I believe the downtown core deserves a liquor outlet. And Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that there's been 5 hits approximately to date since it went on the government webpage of private entrepreneurs that want to have an outlet downtown that are willing to tender on this process. I also want to tell the member opposite in the NDP caucus that this member always consults with this community. I went to my town council and I spoke to those people last week, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you that the mayor and the council endorsed what the government is doing for the infrastructure in our community. And the liquor sales helps improve the infrastructure in our community. And let me tell the member opposite that the Liberals had our seat from 93 to 98, and the NDP had it from 98 to 99. The Liberals, all they did from 93 to 98 was strip our community. They took jobs from our community. They did not put one bit of asphalt in our community. Then, lo and behold, the people of Yarmouth gave the NDP an opportunity to represent them, the people of Yarmouth. What did they do? Nothing. Nothing. But let me tell you what a Conservative government has done and a member from Yarmouth has done for Yarmouth since 1999. Every year since 1999, we've had capital expenditures on our roads in the Yarmouth area. Mr. Speaker, jobs. We created jobs in our community. Register.com is a success story in our community. Over 270 jobs, and they are looking at a major expansion in our community. Mr. Speaker, new water treatment plant of over $5 million in our community. Sewer treatment plant in the Port Maitland area. New school addition for the Port Maitland Elementary School. New school addition for the Yarmouth Memorial High. A new correctional center in Yarmouth, a $10 million investment. Jobs in our community. And Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Justice was in my community approximately 2 or 3 months ago, and we just announced a new justice center in our community. Mr. Speaker, it's the sales from the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission that helps this government put the infrastructure in communities. And it's working with the communities. I work with my councils. I work with the business community. And I can also tell the members opposite that my council and the business community are looking now at ways of enhancing the downtown with the existing liquor store that's there now to attract new business to the downtown area. Mr. Speaker, and I could go on for hours here of issues that we've dealt with and that this member deals with his local community. I'm not like the previous members that never ever were seen from the day that they knocked on the doors to get the voters to vote for him, and then they never saw him again until they went back to the doors. Well, this member deals with his people every day and every week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was very stimulated by the last comments by the members opposite. However, we will talk about prior to 1993. When we will start prior to 1993. When we took over government in 1993, the province of Nova Scotia was bankrupt. Thank you to the members opposite. I can remember an occasion that one day we didn't have an opportunity probably even to make the payroll because they run so much debt up in this province, and they continue to run the debt up in this province at a disgracefully high rate after the Premier promised in his election campaign he would add nothing to the debt. So this is all crap. I give this member the courtesy of listening to him, and I would ask Mr. Speaker that I have the same opportunity. And we can have a discussion anytime on this. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the issue, the real issue, not all the great stuff that the last member said that he claims that he did. Probably would have happened anyway. But the real fact with this thing is you're taking jobs out of the downtown. And I didn't realize until the member said we're making a private operation. It seems going to be a private liquor store downtown too. Well, I think this whole issue, and the government has been promoting this all along, and the Minister of Economic Development said himself, trying to get more money out of the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission. Totally agree with it. Not a problem. And that money does hopefully go to good things in the province, even though the debt's growing like crazy with this extra money. But one thing that a business does when a business goes to make more money, the biggest cost you usually have is employees. Biggest single cost you have. So the solution to reducing the cost of employees is to privatize. And it looks like the government is heading in that direction. You're attaching all these stores to the big chain stores, open them up in between. So all you need to do is move a clerk in, you pay $5 or $6 an hour or two, and then you have all the employees no longer working for the province of Nova Scotia through a Crown corporation with all the benefits those employees have and enjoy, and they've worked to do all this time. They're going to have employees of the superstore or the government side's favorite company, Sobeys, and they're going to have these businesses there. They're going to eliminate these jobs that have been so hard for people to get and are so treasured in the rural communities. So I think they're headed towards privatization. That's what's going on here. It's nice to have greater returns to the province, but there's other ways to do it, rather than take some good jobs away from Nova Scotians. It's a situation, as the employees go up, the minister said, the employees are up, that's true. So then as the employees go up, again, your cost of employees go up higher and higher and higher, and the more cost you have in employees, the more attractive it is to eliminate those employees by privatizing and let private business do it at a lower cost to employees. And it's just, it's interesting to see how all this situation is starting to unfold. First, they tried the privatization thing. There's a huge outcry from the communities. So now they backed off a little bit, put a few little stores in place, and now they're getting all lined up for these big businesses to come in, take it all over, privatize it slowly, one little store at a time, just try a sample, see how that works, and try another one and another one. So easy. The store's right there, staff is there from the store, they just move in and take the jobs over, and that's it. They'll probably do a transition thing and say, if you want to keep your job here and continue on working the Liquor Commission, no problem, but you're going to become an employee of Sobeys. And then Sobeys will say, okay, that's no problem. We'll hire you on as an employee, but you're going to be a part-time employee, no benefits, nothing that goes with that at all. And guess what? Your wages are going to go way down. And guess what? We don't have a union anymore to protect you. So, if you don't do a job exactly like we want, and today you're going to work on liquor sales, tomorrow you're going to work stocking shelves, and next week you may be on the cash register in the store, in the grocery store. And that job maybe pays $5, $6, $7 an hour, if that much. So then you've got people that have made their livelihood from working in a liquor store, making good money, looking after their families, are going to be faced with a problem. They're either going to have to take the job at Sobeys or the superstore and then find out that they can't support their families anymore. And then what's all this good economic development going to do? It's going to be for nothing. And it's going to defeat the whole purpose of the situation. Then you look at the downtown core of these small towns the livelihood of the towns. And you see the big box stores come in place. You see downtown Dartmouth is a prime example. For years and years and years, they tried to save the downtown. You still go down there any day through the week, and it's like a ghost town. Even though there's some big banks down there and some medical offices, there still isn't the core there to attract the people down there and to make sure the employment is in that downtown core so the core can build and grow and be vibrant and be part of the community. And as we move more and more away from the downtown core aspect of these small communities, we lose the nature of the communities, the core of the communities, the things that makes a community a very special place. Yarmouth is a very special community. Liverpool's a special community. All these communities in Nova Scotia are very, very special places. And they got that way because our ancestors went there, and that's what they wanted to do, and that's how they wanted to make the community. So every time you take a service out of the community that the province has, whether it's a liquor store, or registering motor vehicles, or whatever it may be, it takes away from the core, and it goes to other areas. And it's a situation though, that is absolutely disgusting, you know. These guys must be, you know, they keep on hassling here, which I enjoy, quite frankly, but it means that I must be really hitting a note here with them, because if I wasn't hitting a note with them, I'd be sitting quietly listening. So it really must be the plan of the government. I'm going to anxious to see the budget and see how much more money the growth they're going to have in liquor sales, because if I remember right, the last one that they had here was the numbers were down in the sales they projected from the budget quite substantially. And they're going to see how much they try to balance the books this time again by shuffling the way they do the accounting process. That was a pretty neat trick they did that time to balance the books. I'm going to see the neat tricks this time. And if they don't balance the book this time, with almost $1 billion of promise from the federal government, they'll never balance the books. So I trust we're going to have a nice, really good, solid budget for all Nova Scotians. And hopefully it isn't taking away jobs from people in the civil service of this province that desperately need these good paid jobs, highly paid jobs, to ensure that they can look after their family and continue to look after their family and make the local community grow. Because as we go through the process, these are cherished jobs in small communities. There's not a lot of jobs in a lot of communities. And you see the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission, it's a steady job, and it works very, very well. And it makes the people the possibility of buying a home and doing the things that they need to do to properly look after their families. And that's important. That is important for the structure of Nova Scotia. And if we don't have those things in the rural communities, as the growth in the community shrinks, everybody seems to be moving to the Halifax Regional Municipality, which is great. I live here and I enjoy it here, but I hate to see the small communities die and slow down to a point that they no longer can support themselves. You go through, originally in Yarmouth, the town council had tried to prevent this happening, but as all town councils do, they change their mind over time, and that's their right to do that. But hopefully this won't have a huge negative impact on the community as it goes forward. But again, you know, the members opposite keep hassling, so I must be hitting a note here. I enjoy that, because when you hit a note with them, it means that there must be going to privatize these stores. Absolutely must have hit a note, because they're probably going to privatize this. And I'm sure that the employees of the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission, who were very upset and have been upset for a number of years, the possibility of privatization, will be quite interested in these comments they're making. It's too bad they couldn't make them on the record, which would be more interesting for us to hear. But I'm sure someday they will. But as we go through this process and we see what's happening, and we see what's happening to small rural Nova Scotia, we see the towns and the out-migration to the bigger cities like HRM. Every time you change something in those communities, it hurts the community, especially in the downtown core. When you see the people that work in these stores, and liquor stores in particular, or any store like that, you move from the core, the people can afford to go buy things, that shop during their lunch hours and other times, affects other small businesses in the community. You put a private store in, the people typically aren't paid as well and won't have the disposable income to do the things that they would do if they had the funds to do it. So it has a negative impact on all Nova Scotians, and every time we make a change like this, it does hurt. It does hurt the people, it does hurt the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all members for taking part in the debate this evening. House adjourned till 9 a.m.